Some bruises we had to get through to get everything set up, but we are here. So thank you all. Give yourself a round of applause for being here early on a Friday morning. And to get things kicked off, we are starting a little bit later, but we're just gonna maybe hopefully have a couple of volunteers to share their answer to this morning's icebreaker question. So the question is, what is one thing we would never guess about you? And sometimes I was reading that question, I was like, that's a little hard to understand. So I also thought if there's a fun fact or something that, you think sets you a little bit apart, feel free to share. Any takers? Not one person? Craig.
I spent a year of my life in a body cast.
Oh, okay. You're allowed to have extra couple of seconds, just a little bit of context.
I broke my femur when I was a kid.
Oh my God.
And so I had a cast from here down both my legs.
So you did not have a fun summer, one summer?
I went to the beach in my wheelchair.
You did? Well, at least you got that sunshine. Glad you're here. Anyone else? Anyone in the back? I'll share. I was, I don't know if this is like that big, but I think sometimes people do get surprised. I was a flight attendant for a couple of years. I also studied biochemistry, and now I work at a marketing agency. So I obviously like a little bit of a lot of things. But one more person? One thing? One fun fact? Something cool you're doing this weekend? One thing? Nobody?
Well, I just filled everything
Yeah.
out. Say one thing. You know everything about
I'll
it.
go.
Oh, thank you, Colin.
I was arrested in high school. Yeah,
Oh.
at high school, I was actually taken out in handcuffs in front of the entire school.
Oh my gosh, are we allowed to ask what the charge was?
It was paraphernalia. It was makeshift pipes back whenever, marijuana wasn't legal.
And he was a really good kid.
And he grew up just fine, so you know what?
Just fine.
That's where you got your creative beginnings. I love it. I'm going to pull up my little slides here. So admittedly, we have a wonderful chapter host. Her name's Lindsay Peony. Most of you probably know her if you've been to Creative Mornings before. She worked diligently for over a year to get our chapter accepted. Creative Mornings is a global organization. It has, we'll run through a few numbers here in a little bit, but they have chapters across the globe. So we're really excited to be doing this still after COVID and everything that we've gone through. Unfortunately, Lindsay is out of town this morning. She had to attend a family funeral, so she is here in our hearts. We miss her dearly, but we'll be thinking of her and her family this morning. So I'm going to do my best to fill in. So here we go. At Creative Mornings, we have a lot of updates that come out with everything that kind of has been changing with COVID, the ups and the downs, the policy changes back and forth to virtual and in-person. We went ahead and actually started getting some socials going. We have a newsletter now that you can sign up for. So if you'd like to stay abreast of everything that's coming out, our featured speakers that we have, if you have speakers in mind, if you have musicians you'd love to see here, if you have family and friends that you'd love to have come join, just reach out to us at Creative Mornings Columbia. And just a note, if anyone does need extra chairs, there are a few chairs in the back just in case anyone needs more seating. Big thank you to Influence & Co. For being our sponsor this month and bringing those wonderful coffee and donuts. Influence & Co. is a content marketing agency right here in Columbia. And fun fact, I should have noted this, is that a few of us actually in the room today, our founder is here, which is wonderful. And they were just wonderful in donating our coffee and donuts this morning. And a few of our members actually work at the company. Lindsay works there as well, so it's kind of a fun little team event as well. MailChimp is one of the Creative Mornings global sponsors. A lot of people know MailChimp as a helpful email marketing tool, but they have a ton of other services. And actually, if those of you that did register to be a Creative Mornings member, you have access to all of these wonderful services at a discount. So make sure to go to the Creative Mornings website. So if you ever need any marketing tools or new services, sometimes they test out new products. So if you're a member, you always get to get some cool discounts or updates on these things. We all know if you experience something great, you usually go and tell your friends, your family, your network about it. So referrals are a wonderful way to get new business. In fact, 43% of freelancers, when they were surveyed, said that the best way to get a new client is through client referrals. So there's a great guide that MailChimp just released. You can see that on Creative Mornings website as well if you go and check that out. Again, here's just a little bit of numbers about Creative Mornings as a whole. So you can see that they are now in 223 chapters, over 67 countries. On average, there's about 27,000 attendees per month. They're also hosting talks online and a ton of videos too that get posted to YouTube and things like that. So it's a really wonderful community. This is my favorite thing. I love Creative Mornings field trips. I think if anyone ever looks at my Google calendar, I always have one of these up at least a month. These are all virtual field trips that Creative Mornings, any chapter in the community can host them. You can go to Prague virtually and do a visit through their gallery. You can learn all sorts of new skill sets. There's a ton of marketing tips. People get together and do brainstorms. You can go visit other people's restaurants and see how they cook. Most of it is virtual. Before COVID, a lot of folks were doing things in person, so we're sitting and waiting to see how that goes here for Columbia, and hopefully our numbers will start going down so we can start hosting these in the future. But if any of you, again, that have registered and signed up, you go check this out. There are just hundreds of things that you can choose from. You can do it. You can take it at your own time, watch replays, or join live. Highly recommend checking those out. And now I'd like to bring up Lauren to read our Creative Mornings Manifesto. Or Lauren, you can stand wherever you want to.
All right, those of you who are normally here when Mike does this, I'm not Mike. So I'm just letting you know. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections, in learning from others, in hugs and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome.
And now I'm going to talk a little bit about our theme this month. So every month we have a new theme. We get our themes in the beginning of the year, and that's usually how we start kind of going through folks in our community and thinking through who ties to what. And what's really neat about the themes that come through, they are chosen from a different chapter for each month. I think Columbia gets to choose sometime in 2023, which is so cool. And we'll also have a local illustrator be able to do the illustration that will be shared across the globe. So July's theme is spirituality. Spirituality is the search for our deepest values and meanings, something that touches us all. It is our yearning to peel back the curtain of the world we can see. The world comes from the Latin spiritualis, meaning of breath, wind, and air. It comes so naturally, it might as well be breathing. Our Jetta chapter chose this month's exploration of spirituality, and Bayan Yisin illustrated this particular theme. And when we do get these themes, there's another gal, Carrie, she's not here today, but we go through and start choosing speakers or vetting different speakers and seeing how themes tie to each other. And sometimes it's super obvious, and we're like, oh, this is the perfect person for this. And sometimes we're like, oh man, this could touch on so many different layers and different things, and everyone can look at things with a different perspective. So that's what's really cool about the themes. It really is just kind of how does it tie, how does it align with your work, your creative processes. So this month, we have Colin LaVaute as our featured speaker, and I'd like to introduce him now and bring him up to talk to us about spirituality.
How's everybody doing today? Thank you all for coming up. Give it up for Meredith, folks. Oh my goodness. I've worked with Meredith. I really only first got to know Meredith at Peddler's Jamboree this year, and this is the first time I've gotten to see her perform, and that was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad that the first time I got to see her was here. Okay. It's all good. I'll just go ahead and start rolling a little bit here. So I've played plenty of shows before. I've been in front of folks in a lot of different capacities. This is a little new for me, but I'm excited, and I want to thank everyone at Creative Mornings for having me out here. A little bit about me. I'm the CEO of another digital marketing agency here in town called LV Creative. We do content creation for over 20 retainer clients in the Mid-Missouri area. Everything from graphic design, photography, videography, and even some other fun projects like the Como Beer Book are just a few of the projects that we work on a frequent basis. I'm also a musician, played music most of my life, ever since I've been playing in bars since I was 15 years old. My main act has been Decadent Nation since 2003, and we're very excited, thank you, we're very excited to be finishing up a new album that we're going to be releasing this year, and so music is a big part of my story, and with that, I'm also the host of Big Muddy Music Hour on KBIA, the NPR station here locally, playing what's relevant music from the country of the Midwest and beyond, and I like to showcase a lot of local acts. Meredith, need to get you on the show. But we also have had a lot of big name artists like Ben Folds, Nick Hexum from 311. So I like to be able to intersperse giving exposure to relevant Midwestern acts in between, big rock stars. And we have a great time with that. And most recently, I was fully funded for my first feature-length film, Hero, which is going to be the majority of what I'm going to talk about today. But on my radio show, my first question I always ask guests is, what started you off on your musical journey? What was the instigating factor? And so I thought it might be important to just give a little bit of context about my creative journey, because I think that bit of context gives everyone better understanding as to the person that they might be hearing on the radio, and in this instance, who you're seeing on the front of the stage. So I'm a proud Missourian. Lived in Missouri my whole life. You'll see that line, "Hail from the land of Dan Boone." That's from Dan Boone's Stomp, a Decadent Nation song. In fact, someone that I went to school with, kindergarten through high school, and he was in my grade from kindergarten through senior year of high school. Joe Knight's is here with us today, and I want to thank you for coming out. But the bottom line is, little Colin was obsessed with movies and music, whether it was listening to Pearl Jam on CD, that was some of my CDs that my sisters would have, or tuning into even the Beatles, where it was a big thing for me at a young age. Music and movies were a big part of my life, and I'll never forget whenever I was 7 years old and I saw Jurassic Park for the first time. And as a 7-year-old, not knowing going into something like that, and just blowing my mind, and then as the credits roll, it said directed by Steven Spielberg, and I was like, I want to do that. So I always wanted to be a film director growing up, but I also thought I was going to get out of Missouri. I was growing up. I was like, man, I need to get to LA. I need to get out of here. There's a lot of aspects that made me want to leave Missouri, but there's a lot of things that prohibited me from being able to go to places like USC or UCLA, namely money, and it's very expensive to go there in terms of out-of-state tuition. So I ended up staying and went to school at the University of Missouri. There I studied fine arts photography, fine arts with an emphasis in photography, and English. In particular, my English emphasis was in ethnography, folklore. Basically the social studies form of studying society and different cultural groups. And all those things have lent itself to who I am today. It's one of those things where they say, get the degree. It was an interdisciplinary studies degree. It was a kind of a double minor. I jokingly refer to it as a whatever. What do I say? Whatever the F I wantology. That's what I studied. I just took classes that interested me at the end of the day. But all of it lent itself into the different things that I have been able to do professionally and creatively in my life. My first big kid job, this is years after I graduated, because I just kind of mucked around a little bit and toured with my band and worked at Panera for a handful of years before I got a job at the Central Missouri Humane Society as the shelter relations coordinator, and I did videography, photography there, and all the things that I learned in school I was able to apply in the early days of social media, and I'm really proud of all the work that I did there, because I was able to take what I learned in Photoshop and make flyers and designs and use my writing skills to write effective copy. And during my time there, I blew away all their fundraising, all their fundraising records They still have an event to this day called Whiskers and Wine that I created. In this first year, we were at $16,000, which was like crazy for them back then. Now I think it brings in like close to $100,000 every year. So it was from that I finally launched off on my own and started just working piecemeal with I pick up clients one by one, and I don't go knocking on everyone's doors. I like to work with people that have quality business and good brand and are good people. And so I would basically do what I was doing for the Humane Society, but picking up clients piecemeal. And I did it mostly by myself, everything, the photography, the videography. I skipped over an important part, actually. It was back around the time I graduated from college. I was working in film. I was working on movies. And even before that, I produced a feature film. I was a producer on a movie called Mil Mascaras versus the Aztec Mummy, which was a luchador film with the actual luchador Mil Mascaras. He's like a legendary masked wrestler. And it was completely ridiculous. It was a terrible movie. But I learned a lot. I mean, I was basically I was 20 years old, and I was basically the boss of 30 professional adults. And so I learned a lot about what it takes to make a movie. And then I also was the second assistant director on Your Next, which was the feature-length film that was here. And I worked on a bunch of commercials. I was still really focused on becoming a filmmaker, but I also realized that the timing wasn't right for me to pursue that career. In order to really do that, it was going to require me to give it my everything, and I wasn't in a place in my life where I was ready to do that. So I told myself, I am going to be a filmmaker, but whenever I do, it's going to be on my own terms, and then that's what eventually happened. Whenever I was funded for this. So and we're going to get to the movie and spirituality here, I promise, but. I thought it'd be important to share some of my philosophies, and I think it's important for me to talk about the agency side of stuff too, because this is a quote from one of my songs that I tell every potential client when I meet with them for the first time, is everybody's yelling at me, trying to get me to buy something. I wish I could buy something to get the people to stop yelling at me. I think most people hate advertisements. They don't like being yelled at the end of the day, but people want to be engaged. And with that approach, that's kind of how I think about everything creatively that I try to do. It's not really trying to beat someone over the head with a different idea or a brand. It's about doing something that lets their guard down and maybe gets them to engage, to interact with whatever content we may be putting out there. And my other philosophy, and this isn't just a creative philosophy, this is how I live my life, is it's all about the save. And essentially, everyone messes up. We all mess up. We might hurt someone's feelings. We might mess up at our job, but it's in how you recognize your faults and rectify that situation that defines your character at the end of the day. And I think that can be attributed to creative aspects as well. You might go see a live band, and they might not be doing that hot, and they may be just like, meh, but then they wow you on the last song. Well, that's the only thing you remember. Same thing with a book too, right? You're be kind of a mediocre book, but man, that ending, that's what sticks with people. So, it's really about how you leave people at the end of the day in terms of whether or not you're doing something with quality. So that leads us to the story of Hero, which I'm a big Redditor. Anyone get on Reddit? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Reddit. I get on Reddit every single day, multiple times a day. And I was on there one day and I saw this photo. And I was like, what is going on here? And it said on the photo, Des Moines River, which also caught my attention because my lovely wife Alicia, who's here with us, is from Des Moines. And Des Moines is kind of like a second home to me. So I was like, how have I never heard about this? And so I looked into it. And it really intrigued me. And so this was it was August of last year when I first saw this photo. And last year I was starting to think that I wanted to make a movie or a short film. I was thinking I was going to script something, do a narrative, do a short film, something with actors and everything. But then I saw this photo and I was like, this is like Bruce Willis. He literally looks like a superhero. And I was at the beginning I was imagining man, we could doing a narrative version of this. I'm like, Colin, that's going to take $200 million just to do this scene. And so that wasn't feasible. And I was like, oh yeah, duh, make a documentary about it. And luckily, I was able to find a financier that believed in the story as well. But it took time before I I did that. I reached out to all the subjects because the thing about this is the one sentence synopsis for the film. A tragic boating accident, a harrowing rescue, and a Pulitzer Prize winning photo are all at the center of this story about an ex-con whose heroics thrust him into the national spotlight. So I am actually going to try to show you the first 5.5 minutes of this movie. And I'm gonna hold the mic up to the computer and hopefully the sound will be all right. But if I'm not happy with how it sounds, I'm gonna stop screening it. So just be aware of that. Oh, and by the way, disclaimer, there's 0 color correction on this, so it looks washed out. The color correction is one of the last things that we do in terms of the editing process. So we shot in a video format that's called log, which makes it look really opaque, but it actually gives us more information to be able to work with to make the colors really pop. So disclaimer.
I come home from work and I got a call from somebody. I can't remember who called me and said, turn on your television. And I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, in fact, I was sitting right here and got a phone call from the general superintendent down at the job. He said, hey, you better get down here to the Des Moines River. A couple of kids have fallen in the river and they're trying to get them out. And I thought, oh, wow. So I grabbed my stuff, hopped in my pickup, and drove down there. It probably took me 20 minutes to get there. Well, by the time I got there, most of the rescue people were gone. Everybody's kind of around, but people were a little sad, and I wasn't really sure what happened. So I asked around and quickly found out that they were very disappointed that the husband that was in the boat had drowned, and it wasn't 2 teenagers, it was 2 older adults.
When he got her and he pulled her up, and there was cheers and there was applause from all sides of the bank. It was really, really cool. I mean, like stereo sound, everybody's relief, and she got put in the boat and taken over the edge. And then it kind of sunk in. Oh my gosh, something really amazing just happened. I can't believe that we all witnessed someone's lives being saved.
After it happened, we all kind of the camera people, we all kind of looked at each other and we're like, whoa, what just happened? And I was like, I think I'm gonna pass out. Somebody's like, me too. Your knees go weak, your adrenaline gets going. It was hard to watch her be there, up until, and then once she got officially saved, it was like, whoa.
The events of the day, as I understand them, a woman and her husband were, right before the 4th of July, they were scouting out a place to watch fireworks on the Des Moines River, and they'd gotten a new boat.
Before you bought this boat, had you been boating much with him before?
No, I'd never been boating. I don't even know how to swim. I wasn't all for that boat. Someone just had this boat and he said, I think I'll buy this boat. And I said, really, what are we gonna do with the boat? But he thought it was a good idea. It wasn't.
Patty and Ralph Neely were planning on taking their grandchildren out for the 4th of July on the boat, and from what I understand, they were looking for a good vantage point to find fireworks. And there was a construction crew who was working above the dam that was building the Women Achievement Bridge at the time was being constructed.
We were working on the semblance of the structural steel pieces of the arch, and I believe we had just finished a function. noticed there was a boat upriver that had just been anchored, sitting there watching us about 200 yards, maybe 300 yards upriver. And as we're getting ready to move the barge, we had already started taking steps. I was driving the tugboat. Crane operator had already lifted up basically the spuds or the anchors that hold the barge, and we were getting ready to go upriver. And one of the guys on the barge, I believe it was Bobby Carpin, yelled, "Hey, that boat's in trouble."
We just went down, we got on the boat, it went fine, it started fine, and I believe someone told me there was a sign that said, "Do not go beyond this point," which we obviously did. And they were working on the bridge, so the cable that used to go across the river, which you could grab if something happened, was gone because I think they were working on it. I mean, they had to take that down to get their machinery and all the equipment in. So that wasn't a choice, and we were traveling down the river, and all of a sudden the boat stopped, and our boat started going in circles. And I said, "I don't think this seems right." And I said, "Maybe we should throw the anchor down." And he threw it down, and we kept going in circles. I said, "I think we need a bigger anchor." But it just went around and around. He said, "You put on your life jacket." And I had it on, but I got it all snapped. And he had his on. I read somewhere he didn't have it on, but he did. But I don't think he had it fastened tight enough.
Okay. Yeah. There. So, that was the first 5.5 minutes, and I'm also going to offer a special invitation as a little bonus to everyone that came today, that if you'd like to see the film in its entirety, we're going to do a private test screening next Thursday at Lakeside Ashland, the brand new state-of-the-art outdoor movie theater, and yeah, you can see it in its entirety. It's going to be feedback session, all that. So the only thing I ask in return is that you bring a folding chair. You're gonna need a folding chair. I'll provide the popcorn. You can BYOB, and we'll have an online survey, basically, and feedback. Yep.
So, do they have bathrooms out there yet, or is it just like porta potties?
That's a good question. I need to ask them. I haven't been out there. Yeah.
The landscape, it's been kind of just a slow process. So I heard the screen and the sound works really well, but just maybe if that's up, not a whole lot of facilities.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good call. I'll definitely talk to Nick about that. But anyway, we shot the majority of the film over 5 days in Iowa. We had a few pickup shoots. Spent a couple days in early October shooting a lot of the B-roll that you saw there, and we had maybe 3 days beyond that 5-day shoot. All in all, about like 9 days of shooting. And luckily, I was able to get the film finished just literally a couple of weeks ago, at least in a form that where it's ready to view. Having the entire thing done. But as it pertains to this week's or this month's theme, spirituality. Reality, I'm not a very spiritual person, if I'm quite honest. But there's a very strong theme of spirituality in the film itself, and even the next project I'm looking at, it involves a church. And so there is definitely something about spirituality that I find interesting. I mean, in terms of the themes of the film, Jason, the hero we come to find, he had a checkered past. At the time that he rescued Patty, he was in a halfway house, and he'd been in and out of prison his whole life, and he was a drug addict. And eventually, drugs took his life. A little bit of a spoiler alert, he wasn't alive for the making of this film, he won't see it. But he was very religious. And one of the other stories that we come to find through watching the film is that he wasn't just a hero on this day, even though he had a troubled past. He saved another life by helping another woman get clean. He couldn't do it for himself, but he inspired another woman to get clean, and she absolutely attributes that to him. And she said she believes that God spoke to her through him, and it was through their common core of religion that they were able to that she was able to find the strength she needed to change her life, and her life was completely changed. Jason's mother is very religious. There's a moment later in the film, and she's another main character like Patty, where if she had one thing to say Jason, or she said she couldn't wait to see Jason whenever she gets to heaven. And then she stops. She says, "If I get to heaven, I'm still working on it." So really, as you may have noticed, there's a chapter. I made the film in 4 chapters. Chapter 1 is the rescue. Chapter 2 is aftermath, fanfare, which talks about all the media coverage, because this event made worldwide news. They ended up on like the Today Show and CBS This Morning and stuff the day after. Chapter 3 is the Child and the Outlaw, which tells the story of Jason's life from birth to death, basically. And the 4th chapter is catharsis. So everything in the first 3 chapters is what happened in the past, but in the 4th chapter I got all the subjects that told these stories and got them together. And as a part of that, I learned of this pastor that had done a sermon about using the events of the rescue as his metaphor and impetus behind the sermon itself. And so I got many of the subjects to come to this church, and we shot footage of them actually experiencing this sermon using Jason as the main subject line. So it's a longer scene than I expected, and I love this shot in particular. It's a church that is I can't remember the denomination off the top of my head.
Assembly of God.
It is, yeah, it was Assembly of God. That's right. But they, in some iterations of this church, they'll have lurching in the pews and stuff like that, but so they didn't get quite that wild, but they were very interactive with their prayers and things of that sort. And so again, it goes back to my roots as from my education in folklore, ethnography. It's another way I describe this film is a portrait of the Midwest seen through the prism of tragedy and triumph. And it's not just getting from point A to point B in the plot. A lot of times I stop and I meditate on a particular character to get a little bit more of that context to really try and paint this broader picture. But why spiritual practices? Why does that interest me? If I'm to create this Midwestern portrait, I have to look at Midwestern culture through an ethnographic lens, creating context within my subject's world. To ignore the subject's relationship with religion and spirituality would be to ignore some of the very things that make this story unique to begin with. And in reality, spirituality isn't what drives me, but I do find a lot of that really intriguing. I think that there's something to that. I mean, there's a lot of religiosity out there. I don't partake in it, but I do find there to be a lot of interesting stories told within that world. So spirituality is what drives me. But I think that picture speaks for itself. And that's it.
And we do have about 10 minutes if anyone has questions about the film, about the process making it, what some of those interviews might have been like, or, since it was your first feature film, I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold and see if anyone else does.
What's the showtime next week?
So gates are going to be 7:30. I think we're going to start moving around 8. Yes?
What was the process like of getting funded for the film?
It's an interesting story, of which I can't get into the details of in great, too much detail, because my investor is actually a silent investor.
Oh, okay.
But I had someone that was on the line and was very interested. And I thought he pretty much verbally told me he was going to do it, and then he hemmed and he hawed, and I could just tell it wasn't going to go right. And I just had this shot in the dark idea. It was someone that's in Des Moines, and I just said to Alicia, hey, actually, the funny thing was the week before Dave Chappelle announced he was going to do a tour the following week. I'm going to go he had a movie that a bunch of film festivals were going to show, and then they disinvited him because of his controversial special, and he's like, I'm going to take my movie out on the road next week. And so he just announced next week I'm going to these places. One of them was Des Moines. I was like, oh man, I want to go to that. And then who came around the time of me thinking I should go approach this person about the film. And so it was kind of, I just said to Alicia, it's like, let's find something to do with the kids. Let's go watch Dave Chappelle. And I hit up that guy. It's like, will you meet with me tomorrow morning? And he said, yeah, sure. And I had a 45-minute conversation with him. And 2 days later, he said, let's do it.
So where were you when you discovered the story? Like your first, like when did you hear about it?
I was just at my house. I was just scrolling on Reddit.
On Reddit?
Yeah, it was just I saw that photo on Reddit and immediately, and I think that photo is going to be part of the hook for the movie. You know, like I'm hoping, you know, you'll see it on a streaming service and people are going to see that photo and be like, oh, and they'll have the same reaction I did. What's going on here?
Was there any resistance from any of the characters? Was anybody, was it a painful experience? Did anybody not want to go back and talk about it?
Yeah, there was a few people. My biggest hold, most people were completely, they want to tell a story. They want Jason to be celebrated because he wouldn't allow himself to be celebrated in life. He did not want the spotlight. He didn't like it, you know, and part of that was him being humble and everything, but also just, you know, his checkered past. He just didn't want any focus on him. And so many of the subjects were excited to be able to celebrate him in death in a way that he couldn't be celebrated in life. A couple of subjects that were a little difficult or were kind of holdouts. The big one was actually the Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. She has a completely new life living out in the middle of the woods in northern Iowa, and she took her cues from Jason. That was a big reason why she was a holdout, was Jason didn't want the spotlight, and she kind of took her cues from that, like, I don't want to take away from this. But then whenever I mentioned I'm pretty tied into Des Moines. I can go into a bar in Des Moines, and a lot of times people will recognize me like a bar here in Columbia. And I know a writer for the Des Moines Register. The Des Moines Register to this day is very excited to share that photo anytime they can. It sells papers and gets a lot of clicks. But I was able to, whenever I officially announced the film, it was a pretty successful PR campaign because it made the front page of the Tribune here, but also the front page of the Des Moines Register. And then when that happened, the photographer called the reporter and asked her more questions about me. And ultimately, she decided, I need to do this. The other person that was difficult and still a little difficult to work with is Jason's daughter, who struggles with a lot of the same issues that he does. She no-called, no-showed the first time that we were supposed to interview her on the first shoot. Eventually, she stepped in front of the camera, and I'm really glad she did because she's definitely one of the more colorful characters in the film. Yeah.
Are you going to do any screenings up in Des Moines?
This is going to be the only public screening I'm going to do until the premiere. So this is definitely like a test screening, like, you know, I want like raw reactions from people. It's not in its final form. And I'm even going to be doing some more edits over the next week prior to what you all are going to see based on feedback I've already gotten from some people. But yeah, my hope is that we'll have a nice big premiere at the Missouri Theater here and a premiere up in Des Moines as well.
How long is the movie?
The running time right now is 1 hour and 43 minutes. I'm guessing I'm probably going to be shaving off about 5 minutes before next Thursday.
And then I have a question just because, you know, we interview clients too, so I was wondering if when you're interviewing, like your work at LV Creative, did that help kind of prepare, just kind of digging into people's stories and trying to stay neutral and getting, or was that, you know, kind of different filming a documentary?
Yeah, you know, I definitely have a different approach, but there was a kind of an outline that I had for all of the folks. There were specific things that pertain to their story that, you know, would make sense for me to ask other people, but I also asked a lot of the same questions, you know, like what makes Iowa special? I think I'm going to make a little short film of people just talking about Iowa, just from those responses. I was even thinking I was going to make a chapter of it, but I was like, yeah, people aren't going to have patience.
Isn't it like, this must be heaven, or is it just Iowa?
Yeah, exactly. You know, whenever I'm interviewing people for corporate stuff, I definitely ask like a lot of the same questions because with that, whenever I'm doing stuff for a client, those types of videos serve multiple purposes for them and for me, right? Because question that you can be repeated to different people begets different answers. You learn about the culture of the company straight from the horse's mouth, and then from their responses, it begets a lot of great content for my team to be able to extrapolate copy in the long run. So.
And then my last question kind of pertaining to that is, what did you have to do to kind of build that trust up? Because I know you said you kind of talked to the subject matter, the subjects first, but was it just like kind of through a quick phone call, or did you actually have to kind of wine and dine on them a little bit?
Yeah, so before I knew I could do it, I had to get Patty, the woman that was rescued, and I had to get Jason's mom on. I knew from the beginning that they would be the main characters, and they did end up being the main characters. And so I called them both and had really pleasant conversations with both of them. They're both beautiful ladies. And but I met Patty one-on-one, and yeah, they were both, whenever they were on board, every subsequent person I talked to said, hey, Patty and Sharon are doing this. And I think it gave everyone that much more of a permission structure.
You believe in coincidence?
Do I believe in coincidence? I believe in timing. I think there's a right time for everything. And I think that I think I was meant to find that photo. I think it was the right time. I don't think I could have made this movie 5 years ago. So I think that there's a right time for everything, and this is the right time for this film to have been made.
I ask that because that's a spiritual thing, right?
Yeah, it definitely could be. Yeah.
I didn't want to leave it there.
I practice in the church of I don't know.
Cool.
Anybody else? Anyone else questions before we kind of wrap it up?
What was the biggest thing that you learned from the whole process, like personally? You can be top of head.
Well, I definitely learned about how I do some things differently, going back around. In particular, the most difficult stuff was the stuff that's in chapter 4, because we had a whole bunch of subjects, they each had their own microphone, and we had multiple cameras and stuff like that. It was the first time, even though I had a really great crew. My crew was so awesome. I had Austin Kolb from Evo Group, Matt Matlack, who was an employee of mine up until around that time, and Tim Pilcher helping out with sound. I had a bunch of seasoned pros, but even then we were doing something at times that none of us had ever done. And I'm still happy with the stuff in chapter 4, but my next film is going to be a lot more of that type of scenario. It's going to be much more difficult than this one, and it's going to require even more people like tripping over each other and maintaining sightlines. So if anything, I've learned how to do things that I need to be more mindful of certain aspects of those types of shooting scenarios in the future.
Yeah, you talked about like the photo maybe being like eye-catching on a streaming service. So I'm curious, what does distribution of this film look like, and how do you figure all that out?
So it's playing the film festival game. Okay. I'm going to submit it to film festivals and hope that the streaming service picks it up. I completely revamped all my camera gear going into this, but because like Netflix, for instance, has they only accept submissions on where shot on particular cameras. Like it has to be a certain grade. So I got Netflix ready cameras and all new lenses and stuff. It's really helped out the agency. Yeah. And in the past 6 months, I mentioned one of my employees, Matt. He's moving to the Bahamas, so he took another job. I guess I'll forgive him for that. But for 2 years, he was working full time for me, and he did all the video stuff for me, and it was great. But now it's back on my shoulders, and so over the last 6 months, actually, I've become a much better videographer and photographer because I got these new toys, and now I have to use them.
I mean, this is probably so obvious, but are you going to be submitting it to True False? Is this something that would be housed at True False?
Yeah, it could be. I will probably submit it to True False. Whenever people ask me that question in the past, I was so cocksure saying, "Oh, it's going to get picked up before True False." But I kind of missed a timing window for a lot of the film festivals. So in reality, I'm probably going to be submitting a lot of stuff for next year anyway. So the first being Sundance, and we'll see if I can get into that. So.
Anyone else? No? Well, I want to thank Colin especially. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being so gracious, as this was my first time officially hosting, but also just for being here on your Friday morning. Please talk about us, talk about Creative Mornings. If you have speaker ideas, if you have people that you'd love to see in the community or play music, just send us an email. All of our information is right on Creative Mornings Columbia's chapters website. But thank you all for coming so much. You guys can